Hi, my name's Leo WT, and you have found your way to the Conversations podcast. Conversations exist to create spiritually minded conversations about life. We desire to create safe space for dialogue and community. We desire to come together regularly and intentionally to generate conversations about life, belief, and the intersection of the two. Everyone is welcome at the conversation.
Yo,
What's up?
not too much, my dude. That cut is dope. Whoever did your hair, I hope you tipped him good.
She's been cutting my hair for ever, like to the point where it's not even a haircut anymore. It's just like, hey, I haven't seen you in a while. You know?
I love it. Also, your outfit is super dope.
Thank you. I never get to wear this shirt, and I'm like,
awesome.
I'm gonna be on a podcast. Like, this is the time.
Heck yeah. Where'd you get that from? Because I might need to cop one.
I have no idea. I think my mom got this for me for Christmas.
All right.
Yeah, I think honestly I got it on Amazon because I put everything on like a list.
Okay.
And then I just tell people like just go to that list and either buy something from the list or like be like, "Oh, that's a lot like this thing. I'll buy." Yeah, and I just put, I mean, we're talking like there's like 50 odd items, 100 odd items on there, you know.
So it's still somewhat of a surprise when you get it, right?
Oh, it's a super surprise because I'll be on that. I'm like, oh man, I always wanted it, and it's been on that list for like 3 years. You know?
I love it. All right, I'm gonna hit go live here, and we're gonna get this party started. All right, my dude.
Hey, I can go. Can we shoot for like 7:20?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Sweet. All right, I'm going to drop an intro here real quick once the interwebs tell me I'm live, and then we'll make this happen. All right,
I got my composition notebook.
Yes, it's always more serious when there's a composition notebook. You know what I'm saying?
There's a composition notebook. I have, like, I'm ready to go.
Yes.
I have my composition notebook. I have the Book of Mormon.
I love it. You weren't playing when you said you could riff on theism.
Too much of this because I haven't really read this because this is a lot.
Oh shit! Something happened to your microphone, my dude. It sounds like you're underwater. Oh hey, it's still strange. Oh no. Anyway, hey, I think that's better.
I just muted it and popped it back on.
All right, cool. It's the Super Nintendo equivalent of like blow into the cartridge, right?
Exactly.
I like it. All right, my friends, what is up? It's Leo WT. We are here for our 75th millionth episode of Conversations. We are a podcast. We are on YouTube, and we are a live conversation that happens weekly, right around this time, every Sunday night. My name is Leo. Kind of started Conversations roughly 10 years ago. Mostly I got bored when I left college because I felt like there was no one to like have intentionally intellectual and spiritual conversations with. So I said, hey, let's kind of coerce all of our friends to join us at a coffee shop and then make it a thing. And a decade later, it's still a thing. So that's pretty dope. I have my friend here, Justin, who is going to join us, and I'm going to let him introduce himself real quick. This is your turn to tell the world about your fancy shirt and whatever they should know about you.
Oh man. Yeah, so I'm Justin Hubbard. I use he, him, his, all the male pronouns because I'm like super boring male cisgender. And I'm a teacher. I teach high school social studies. I'm the coordinator of the Jamestown Justice Coalition. So I'm guessing everyone's like, oh, he's on video again. Talking again. Yeah, but I live in Jamestown. I have an awesome wife and 2 awesome kids. And yeah, you know.
All right. Good times, my dude. Good times. Just trying to find a share link, but it doesn't want to work for me. So I guess we're just happening in this space right now. So I bet everybody, our literal tens of watchers, are dying to hear why the title of this conversation is Brunch is Canceled.
Oh my gosh.
Is there any way that you could sum this up for the world?
It's hard. It's hard to sum it all up, but really I mean, it came from, I forget the name of the show, but it's a YouTube show. It's like Newsy News or something weird like that. It's like super far left, funny political satire.
All
And
right.
the guy said, I remember him saying, he goes, even when Biden gets elected, brunch is still canceled. And since then, and that was like 2 months ago. And since then, I've just worn it out
Yes.
by saying brunch is canceled. Because to me, like the most chill, relaxed thing you can do is, after a tough Saturday night, is to just wake up on a Sunday morning with your pals and just go to brunch, you know? And
Absolutely.
it's relaxing. And right now, the time that we're living in, there's no time for relaxing, really. That's me. Self healing, self care is super important. But as far as relaxing, I think that's one of the flaws of our society and kind of how we ended up where we are now with major pandemic,
Just a slight pandemic. So we had 304 cases in the past like 3 days here in Cattaraugus County.
in Cat County. Yeah, Chautauqua County's in its biggest numbers as well. And I was at a gym today and somebody was working out without a mask. And I'm like,
No, not cool. Not today, Satan. Not today.
And that's where just really, when it comes to things like, again, the pandemic, the election, just politics in general, the environment, every single social movement that's going on right now,
All of
there's
them.
so much going on, and we don't have the time to really sit back and relax and not take part.
Absolutely.
And to me, that's a lot of what this not wearing mask thing's about. It's like, it won't affect me, no big deal.
Right.
And it is. All of it is affecting you. And if it's not affecting you directly, to me, that's just a sign of privilege in that, if you have that privilege, to me, you have that responsibility to actually take a stand and do something about
do something, right? I was just gonna, you dropped the hard P word, and I was gonna jump right on that, because it does speak of if you don't have to worry about it, it does speak of a certain level of privilege, right? Like I don't live in a household where multiple generations live together. I don't I have access to really good health care. I am able to take time off of work when other people have to go to work. So like I'm gonna go to Walmart without my mask anyways. It just seems to me that it reeks of a certain level of privilege, like a feeling of entitlement, like I am okay here. And I really can't make any sense of it. I just really can't.
I mean, it's tough. So one of the things that I always try to challenge myself to do, it's part of the reason I went into social studies. I really like studying people and figuring out like why are people doing this. It's really like a sociological approach.
Right.
How did society shape you? And so to me, it's always, okay, why are these decisions being made?
Right.
Why are people acting this way? A lot of it has to do with trauma. A lot of it has to do with privilege. Everybody's got a mix of both.
Yeah.
Everybody's got trauma. Everybody's got certain privileges.
Some sort of, some way, some shape, some form.
Exactly.
So, absolutely.
Different, measurements of both. Some people have dealt with a lot of trauma and have absolutely, very, very small privileges in their life, vice versa, and everything in between.
Yeah, absolutely.
For me, it's always, okay, let's try to really figure out why are people doing what they're doing. And that comes down to politics. That comes down to, everything. So with this mask thing, to me, it has a lot to do with privilege, but it also has a lot to do with that phenomena of it. I want to control the outcome.
Absolutely.
I think a lot of people are very scared that the world is chaotic and uncontrollable.
For sure. And there's like an innate need to control that in a lot of people's lives, right?
Well, yeah, and that's where the conspiracy theory mindset comes from.
Mm-hmm.
It's a way of saying, one, that humans are all powerful.
Yeah.
If you believe in conspiracy theories, it's you saying that humans have control. Because, if I think COVID is fake or that it was made in a lab, it's me not willing to admit that it's just here.
Right.
It's just something that happened.
Absolutely.
Because if I believe that that's something that's happened, then anything else in between could happen.
Anything is possible. Yeah, it's entirely true. It's very true. And so
Yeah.
people I feel like even the most healthy of us as humans have the most have a desire, an innate desire to kind of be in control. Like, I'm the captain of my own fate, I'm the master of my own ship. And then when something like COVID comes along and we're like, oh shit, man, like I can't change too much about this. I have to create a framework for myself to understand some level of control in the situation.
Yes. Especially
Absolutely.
Americans. Especially
Oh,
Americans, because you have to think not a lot of bad stuff happens here.
right. Absolutely.
And we're talking like, cataclysmic bad. Yes, of course, we have mass shootings. We have the highest amount of teen pregnancy in the world, as far as the developed world. We have, insane amount of drug use and
Yeah.
prescription abuse and things like that. Human trafficking and everything else in between. But as far as like big events, like we don't have a war here.
No. No.
We haven't had a war here since the Civil War and Pearl Harbor, which was one day, and 9/11, which was one day.
Right. Absolutely.
And look at the effect that those events had on us.
Yeah.
Look at the effect of 9/11.
Yeah, dude, I read this statistic today. I have like 65 thoughts going through my head right now, and I want to talk to you about all of them. So I'm really struggling to prioritize here because you have to keep
education. We were
yeah,
talking about school, and now we're just
all these things.
let's
So
look at 9/11. Let's
yeah,
just get that little thing.
oh my God, I can't even. Let me get my tinfoil hat for a moment here. But I read somewhere today. So I reposted something that we had the Enchanted Mountain anti-war protesters out. Apparently, there's a group of people in the Olean area, Greater Olean area, that protest at Lincoln Park in Olean the first Sunday of every month. And they're peace protesters. And someone commented on the post, and I actually I know this person personally, and they were genuinely asking, like, what are they protesting? They weren't being snarky or anything. They were genuinely asking. And then a couple people jumped on and dropped some statistics, which was great because like I wasn't even able to post at that time. And then I came back and people had like popped on it. But basically, someone posted that we have been at war for like 225 years of our history or something like that. It was something like all but 20 years of our history as America. We've been at some level of war, whether it's declared or not.
Well, it depends on what you consider war. And that's where really, understanding government comes into play.
Uh-huh.
So war is an official thing, right? It doesn't mean conflict.
Right.
It doesn't mean people are dying overseas or anything to do with the troops. It means, did Congress declare war?
Yeah.
But because Congress has the ability to declare war, but the president is the commander in chief. And that separation of powers is important because you don't want the same vessel to be able to do both things.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
We don't want a president who can just declare war anytime. That's not good.
Seems like a bad idea, especially in the last 4 years.
Yes. Oh, totally. I mean, because all you would have to do is be like, wow, my approval rating is at 45%, which is the historically like lowest approval rating, and it happened consistently for 4 years. I'm obviously talking about Trump. I need a war, because wars, whenever that happens, boom. Look at George W. Bush.
Yep.
I mean, his approval rating was squat, and then 9/11 hits. We're going to war. Boom.
Boom. Here we go.
Yeah. But so war is this official thing, but to have a conflict, you don't really need that.
Right.
You don't need that declaration. And you have shadow wars all over the place.
Yeah, absolutely.
The scary thing is, and I mean, it's the really scary thing is that our legislative branch, our Congress, the thing they do the best is do as little as possible.
Yo, that's the truest thing I've ever heard ever.
Yeah, it's scary. And it doesn't matter what congressional candidate, it doesn't matter what senator we're talking about. They do as little as possible because, unlike the president, there's not a big spotlight on them. And unlike the president, they can be in their position for the rest of their life. Mm-hmm. So they have to run for re-election. And if you do something big, it can be criticized. If you do nothing, it can't really be criticized. You can just be like, oh, you did nothing. And they're like, yeah, but I didn't do bad things.
Right. Exactly. This is beginning to feel like an SNL sketch. Like, oh, but
Yeah.
I didn't fuck anything up. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I mean, I would be like, I can't believe 20,000 troops died last night. Oh, wait, they didn't, because we didn't do that.
Exactly.
Boom.
Truth bomb.
And like you bring out the last polar bear.
Right.
Like we still have him. He's still here.
I can't.
No, but they do as little as possible so they can run for re-election. There's no real critiques on them. And then that's where the money comes in, because if I do as little as possible, then big corporations are like, hey, thanks for not doing anything to, change the outcome of my money.
Yeah.
So my money is still going to come in. I'm going to give you some of that money. You run for re-election, and then you just keep on winning.
Keep doing nothing. That's pretty awesome. I feel like that's what Tom Reed has done in Western New York. Just like, let's not do anything and then let people pay us to not do anything.
I have a lot of problems with Tom Reed.
Do you want me to get him in on the call? I'll just hit him up real quick.
I would love to do a call. Like we had that great call with Tracy Matrano, and that was awesome. Yeah. But if it was Tom Reed, like I'm showing up and I'm wearing, like I'm coming in suit and tie.
Yeah.
And I'm just perspiration, but it's just adrenaline.
I'm like ready to go.
Oh man. So I've gone, I think now I started going to Tom Reed's town halls when I was about 20.
Okay.
Now I'm 30. So I would give him one compliment.
Mm-hmm.
Unlike other members of Congress, he does have town halls, so he does hear from his constituents.
Right.
Or gives the appearance of hearing from his constituents.
Right.
Yes, because you have him in a corner. You know that he doesn't know what else to do when he says, we'll agree to disagree.
That's a great non-committal response.
Oh, man. And it's one of the things now that with social media, with these constant like debates that people think they're having, it's one of the things that people just are easily able to step back into. Oh, we'll agree to disagree. Or like, oh, this is my opinion.
Right.
It's like, no, some things are subjective. What's your favorite color?
Right.
Subjective. What is your favorite color?
Mine? Orange. Boom.
Mine's purple, but there you go.
Right on.
See, I like that. See, those are both very like middle of the road, non-committal.
Yeah, exactly. Not committing to any one thing.
Yeah, very expressive colors.
They're colors for the people.
They're colors for the people. See, purple is the color of royalty because the dye was so expensive back in the day that only kings and queens could do it.
Boom. Exactly. It's so much. I love that you love history so much. I love history.
And now it's like my broke ass, I'm going to get as much purple as possible.
Exactly. Here we go. We're going for it. So
and because of Prince.
And because of what?
Prince.
Oh yeah, of course. You got to show some love. So I did make a hair color yesterday called Chocolate Purple Rain, and I'd like to think at least 50% of it was inspired by Prince. So I have
that hair color.
Yeah, I made that hair color. It's on my friend Carly. I'll have to post a picture. So
I'm gonna want to see that.
I can make it happen for you. So I have a question. So you've bopped around conversations for a little bit, and I know we've engaged on enough different levels to have a pretty good feel of who each other is, right? Like we're basically bros. So
we're boys.
Yeah, we're boys.
We're dudes.
We're dudes for life. Bros before hoes. You know what I'm saying? So
yes.
Except for our wives because they're great.
But sex work is work, by the way.
Oh, yes, absolutely. All of the ways.
Yes.
So my question is, and now I'm really excited to riff on this with you because this is one of our less covered topics in personal conversation. So you have this understanding of being a social studies teacher, which obviously informs who you are as a person, which is fantastic because our knowledge should inform our actions, right? We should be acting based on well thought out things that we have like sought out the depths of, right? So you do that with social studies and with education, and that leads you to be an activist. And so what Conversations is all about is developing conversations around these big topics, but then also like taking them and embodying them and letting them change how you act. So what do you think is one of the biggest things that you've learned through the study of history that has impacted the actions that you take in your everyday life? I know. I
That's
like to ask tiny questions.
huge. That's huge. So I mean, I guess I'll start to unpack that with. So one of the things about teaching social studies is that it's an umbrella. It's not
Mhm.
just history, right?
Mhm.
It is history, economics, sociology, a little bit of psychology, geography, and just it's the study of people. And one
Right.
of the flaws and political science, one
Yeah.
of the flaws we have as a society is that in public school, we take all of that and it's like, you get 45 minutes a day, go.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Become a citizen and you can vote now. Hey.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
So one of the big things, I guess, that I've learned from the study of, let's break it down, history. So history, the saying is that history always repeats itself. That's bullshit.
Tell us
Okay.
why.
Yeah. History doesn't repeat itself, it rhymes.
All right.
So it never, you're never going to get the same thing twice.
Mm-hmm.
We're supposed to learn from our mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes we do as
Uh-huh.
people, but inevitably it's just going to come around again,
Mm-hmm.
And that's the good thing is, you can grasp things from history and be like, oh, that's a lot like this.
Mm-hmm.
But it's never going to cleanly repeat itself.
Right.
That's what I love about it, is the fact that everything that's happening now is super new and it's super fun, but you also can break it down and be like, oh, that's a lot like this and he's a lot like this.
Right. Right.
So Trump, for example, he's a fascist,
Of course.
but he's not Hitler.
No, not at all.
He's not, for example, like Hitler, super motivated by his own grievances.
Mm-hmm.
And his grievances fueled his racism.
Mm-hmm.
Hitler failed art student, didn't get into the art college he wanted to. He tried to start a revolution with the beer hole push, didn't work. Beer hole push, super fun, by the way. Basically, a bunch of dudes got drunk and he's just like, let's take over all of Germany. And they're like, yeah, and it didn't work. But right. But so those grievances fueled his racism and his hatred of other people. Whereas Trump, his racism is fueled by convenience.
Okay.
I don't think that Trump in his heart is racist.
Mm-hmm.
I think that Trump uses racism as a way to get ahead.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's a fascist before he's a racist. I think if he could win by being racist, he'll do that. He's done that. I think if he can win by being xenophobic, he would do that.
They'll do that.
I mean, he's won by being a fake Christian for the last 5 years.
Right. Yo, and that's exactly I think exactly what bothers me about like our current political landscape is we have this enclave of fake Christianity, like American evangelicalism, as it impacts American history, is a wildly fascinating topic, because if you take Christianity, and I like to be interfaith on conversations, but like American evangelicalism is such a specific topic that needs to be discussed. Because if you take actual Christianity, right, like the Bible, right, like the life of Jesus, even if you don't believe in the divinity of Jesus, if you just believe in Jesus as a historical person, Jesus was anti-fascist. Jesus was anti-government. Jesus was a brown man who was murdered by the government for his beliefs. So that should have a really radical impact on how Christianity functions in the world. But if you look at American evangelicalism, it's become a tool that someone like Trump could use, right? And he doesn't even embody the values of Christianity, but somehow he's convinced the American evangelical church, like, come to me, I am the savior. Like, you see women, I saw this video of women praying in front of a county courthouse, like on their knees, praying in tongues, that the election results would be overturned and that God would work in the United States and that Trump would be president again. I cannot for the life of me understand how, like, the message of historical Jesus became something that could get Trump into office. Like, that seems to me like a cognitive disconnect between like what you believe and what you do, America, you know?
Because America, so this is the thing that like people need to understand. We have this idea that America was built on Christian values.
Mm-hmm.
It's not.
Mm-hmm.
It's not. A lot of the founding fathers were just theists.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Thomas Jefferson wrote his own version of the Bible, and
Yes.
he took out all the miracles.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so the back in the day, like the really enlightened idea, you know, after the Enlightenment was that, you know, there was of course these omnipotent, omniscient beings that started everything, which I think, like, even if you're an evolution person, you know, which I personally am not, but even if you're an evolution person, it, like, get to the root of it. What was the start? And for me, that's always been my problem with evolution is like the Big Bang. Cool. What happened before that?
Right.
What made that happen? But anyway, so a lot of the founding fathers were of that mindset. Jefferson especially. They thought that God was like a clockmaker. So clockmakers, they make these clocks and then they start them and the clocks work.
Uh-huh.
And then they move on and make other clocks.
Mm-hmm.
That is what a lot of the people back then, the rich, bougie, enlightened people thought.
Right.
That's what God did.
Right.
So there's he doesn't have a stake. God doesn't have a stake in this anymore, which to me makes a lot of sense. But so anyway.
That's like a massive difference, though. If you look at that, that's a massive difference than how people, specifically in American Christianity, tend to see God now. And I say American Christianity specifically because, you know, there is different, just like there are different dialects of English or different dialects of Spanish, there are different dialects of Christianity, right? Yes. And American Christianity has moved away from this clockmaker understanding of God to this, like, I don't even know how to describe it, but this overly involved, volatile, emotional decision maker.
I think they have to, because it's not about their faith, it's about their culture. So I think when it comes to especially evangelical, because when we talk about American Christianity, like that's even a big spectrum, right?
It's broader, much broader.
Yeah, you know, like the most religious. We'll ask you: do you know what's the word? Do you know the ethnic group that is the most religious in the United States by percentage?
I believe it's African Americans, right?
It's African American, yeah. And so when we talk about American Christianity, most of the time we think of evangelical, you know, white evangelical.
Right.
But even that's very different from like your AME Baptist cultures.
Oh my God, so different, incredibly different. For those who don't know, AME is like an African American. It stands for like African American Methodist Episcopal denomination. It's a very different denomination than you would understand Methodist or Episcopal to be. It's a completely unique denomination that's largely, if not entirely, founded in the African American community, I believe.
Yes.
I passed a lot of AME churches when I lived in Harlem. That was like where I became aware of the denomination. So
yeah, and again, that's a lot about culture,
right?
You know, instead of just faith. But going back to the, you know, evangelicals, to me that's always been about culture. You know, and really there's two things that I like observing when it comes to evangelicals. One, self-fulfilling prophecies. I think that evangelicals make God out to be the best that would serve their purposes.
Right. Like they're shaping that.
They're shaping God. God's not shaping them, or they're shaping their faith. Their faith is shaping them.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's a lot of that. And I also, I think a lot of this comes from white fear.
Yeah. Tell me more about that.
Things are changing. You know, you look at it and you think my country isn't. Oh, my screen's going crazy. You look at America right now and you think my country isn't what it used to be. Right. Or what I grew up with it as. So, and what's wrong with that picture?
Right.
You know, what's going on? and you want to have some kind of answer for that.
Right. Right.
And that's where, sadly, and not sadly, but in American history, when it comes to Christianity, one of the fascinating things is that we have so many people that have predicted the end of the world.
Oh my God. Go there. So many people.
So many. Seventh-day Adventist, for example.
Who identify as Christian.
Yes.
Yeah.
So do Mormons.
Yeah, absolutely.
No.
I don't know.
I mean, it's like super Christianity.
Right. Right.
And by super, I just mean like it's next.
Right.
Mormons are to Christians as Christians are to Jewish people.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Absolutely.
I mean, even the name, Latter-day Saints.
Right.
But anyway, Seventh-day Adventists, they started because their founder predicted the end of the world.
Yep.
It came and went.
Yep.
And even though it came and went, you'd think logically, oh, predicted the end of the world, didn't happen, I'm done now.
Right.
Waited a few years. No, because that's not the American thing to do. You got to double down.
Yeah.
You got to double down. So they call that day the Great Disappointment.
Now, I didn't know that. That's something I didn't know that was the name of it. Yeah.
It's crazy stuff and there's so many people that did that. One of my favorite people in American history, Sojourner Truth. She got deep into that.
Mm-hmm.
Not the seventh. I don't think the Seventh Day movement, but she was deep into those small Christian groups that kept predicting the end of the world.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, what the heck were we talking about?
No, I think it's very interesting. It's okay. We were talking about a lot of things, but like
I love it. Yeah.
Started with theism, and this is what I love about conversations, and particularly why I want to have you on here, because of your passion and understanding of history and your ability to kind of step back. Like you're like the football coach on the side of the field that sees the whole field, right? Mm-hmm. And so you understand that it's not just what this lineman does or what the corner does or whatever. It's about how everything moves together, because if you don't have the right blocks, you don't get to play. Like, so for those of you who don't like sports, what I'm saying is that Justin sees the whole field because of his particular experience and knowledge and history. And so something that I like about conversations is when we talk about the intersectionality of different disciplines, because I believe, theism and history and science and anthropology and cultural mores, like they all come together to create the microcosm or the explosion of nuances that we're seeing in 2020, right? And so that's why I wanted you on here, was to talk about that. But something that you said, I'm typing this into the feed right now, so I'm quoting you, live tweeting you on our feed right here. But you said that the American way is to double down when you're wrong, basically, because the Seventh-day Adventists, like, they have the Great Disappointment, and they're like, oh, whoa, but this happened, but we're still marching forward. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I feel like that's so incredibly true, because there is an incredibly American thing about, like, pull yourselves up by your bootstraps. If you work hard enough, everything will be okay. And if everything's not okay, it's not the end kind of mentality. You know what I mean? And so we're doubling down on this, even though we were completely fucking wrong.
Let me make sure that and that's the other thing about me being a history teacher. I really want to make sure that I'm right when I quote history. Yeah, Seventh-day Adventist. Perfect. I had it.
There you go. I love that you fact checked yourself. I wish some other people would do that.
I think you have to, because the last thing I want to do, you go, and that's the double down thing.
Yeah,
if
absolutely.
You're wrong, that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. It's okay to be wrong, and it's okay to evolve, and it's okay to learn. Like, you don't have to be scared of that.
And I think when we talk about things like faith and and everything in between, we talk about people, and especially Americans.
Yeah.
We have a really hard time admitting that we were wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
And when it comes to things, let's not even talk about racism, just oppression.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's one of the roots of it. How these things fester and continue.
Uh-huh.
When we're talking about, I think, people that are, I mean, any type of oppression, say anti-LGBTQ.
Mm-hmm.
One of the words that was thrown around so much when I was a kid, and we're similar in age, was, was the F word, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hate the name. I don't want to. So I'm not gonna. And that was just a normal thing to throw it away, to throw it around, or say something like, that's so gay,
Yeah. Yep.
and that was hatred. Like that was
Absolutely.
ignorance and anti-LGBTQ.
Absolutely.
But if you talk about it and you talk about it with people that were, or say like, well, I'm not against people, but I just think that marriage is between a man and a woman or something like that. You talk to people about that who had those views and just say, well, hopefully now you can see that that was wrong. They won't say, well, now, oh yes, I was wrong. I've learned from those mistakes, or I was raised at a different time and those things were wrong back then, but now I've gained education and I've learned from it. No, people will say like, well, it was a different time.
Yeah. Right. And just stop the conversation.
It was a different time.
Double down on it being okay.
Yeah. And that's like, it's saying it was okay when I did it, but now because people care, because more people care, and they can, and now I know that it hurts people. It wasn't that big of a deal,
Yeah.
And it's double down. It's the unwillingness to admit that you're wrong that has always bothered me. And that's with any type of oppression, racism, things like that. It's one of the worst things we do. You can see it in our political system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's so interesting to me because I feel like a lot of times there's so many ways that American evangelicalism and America like as a political system are in bed together, and so I see a lot of the same flaws in this sort of a thing. So like, we're like, it was a different time, right, in America, or you know what I mean, we were just doing this at that time and that's all, and no conversation about the implications of that. Oh, we freed the slaves, so everything's fine. You know what I mean? And it doesn't. The implications of the actions that were taken don't just go away. And maybe you didn't own slaves, but you participated in a system that did. And I don't understand why both Americans and evangelicals are unwilling to be fallible, right? Because like, how many I hope my mom's not watching this. But my whole family was very interested in the end times as a topic, right? And so when I was young, I'm incredibly nerdy. And so the biblical study of the end times is called eschatology. And when I was young, my grandfather, my Bampa, who I love dearly and I miss, I've missed him every second since he passed. But he was very passionate about the study of eschatology. He went to Bible college in Southern Ohio. He preached in church tent meetings where old ladies were like running up and down the aisles, waving white hankies, like a whole interesting kind of American Christianity. But I have to say that like American evangelicals have been saying the end of the world was coming for so long. And I almost feel like that's an escape hatch, right? Just like emancipation was an escape hatch, right? Like we're just going to say it's the end and then we're going to be absolved of any and all responsibility. But I don't think that that's a viable worldview because it absolves you of any responsibility. Like part of life is taking responsibility for actions and growing from them instead of just saying like, oh, nope, didn't happen. Bye. Didn't happen. Fake news.
And it reminds me. So I've always noticed, and I mean, we're getting into theology now, which is really interesting for me because it's not something I talk about that often, but it's something that I'm always interested in. I was raised in a church. Actually, I was raised at the Arcade Congregational Church. The one that you go to now, which is really
I go
fun.
to the Arcade United Church of Christ, and Justin's grandma, I believe, was a member there. Who knew?
My grandparents were members. My grandma was known as Grandma there.
Oh,
she still is. And my aunt taught Sunday school there. So I was deep into it. And I live in Jamestown, but every other weekend my mom would drive us out to Arcade. And we would spend the night there Saturday and then go to church the next day. And every Mother's Day, every Father's Day, I was there because they had the Mother's Day and Father's Day breakfasts. I didn't really have a relationship with my dad until I was a teenager, so my grandpa was one of those guys.
Yeah.
But so when it comes to that idea of the end times and everybody thinking that they're in them, I think a lot of that has to do with this idea that it's that world is chaotic idea.
Yeah.
You want your life to be significant
Yeah.
and to mean something.
Yeah.
And that's normal.
Right.
That's so normal. So what's more significant than the second coming?
Right. Right.
You know? And also we hyper focus and just magnify when bad things happen to us.
Mm-hmm.
9/11 or
Right.
the coronavirus. These things happen, and oh my gosh, I've never experienced something like this before, so it must be a sign because nothing has ever been this bad before,
Mm-hmm.
when truly it has.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And it's been worse.
Yeah. If we decenter our moment in history for a second, there have been plenty of moments that have been terrible and awful and worse than what we're going through right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And that again, when it comes to, teaching history and teaching social studies, you realize that.
Yeah.
You
Absolutely.
you realize that things that have happened, especially in other places, it so much worse than this.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the fallible things about America is so many bad things have happened all around the world, and we have remained untouched by a lot of them.
Yeah.
And then when it hits our shores, that's when we freak out, and that's where the hatred and just the overtly selfish acts come out.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. So
But
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
yeah, well, and one thing it made me think of when you talked about your grandpa and how he had those beliefs and that background and those views,
Right.
and you really didn't agree with them, and you thought they were radical, but you still loved him. I think that's super important.
Yeah.
When it comes to how we interact with other people.
Yeah.
We're extremely divided right now
Yeah.
as a nation, which is horrible.
Absolutely.
And it's all, we always say now it's all political, and really it's all cultural. Like
Right.
politics is just a big culture war now. Like,
Right.
policy, it doesn't matter because it's not happening anyway. So now it's all about culture. But I think you have to take people where they are, and I think you have to understand that people do harmful things, but they do not. I don't think a lot of people do them based on harm. So
Right. Yeah,
the
for sure.
story, yeah, the story that comes out of that is I'm biracial. My parents got married in their early 20s. They went to college together. And my family is very loving family, as when I say my family, I mean my mom's family, by the way. I'm not really close with my dad's family. A lot of tragedy there, so I don't know a lot of them. But so with my white family, they're great people. My grandparents are like salt of the earth people. But my mom brought home a black man in 1983,
Right.
1984 or 5 maybe. And the amount of like hatred that she saw from her own family and rejection was like, it was very harmful to her. And then
Absolutely.
harmful to me and my sister. Certain members of my family disowned her. Certain racial things are still said from that side of the family, and that really harmed me, and that still really hurts me. And that came from everyone. But my grandfather and my grandmother are still great people. Great people. They did harmful things. A lot of it came from ignorance and not knowing.
Yeah.
And that's where it comes from, understanding, things that you've made mistakes about in the past, and then saying, that was wrong.
Yeah.
And I've had those conversations with with members of my family. And, from that came a lot of like healing on both sides, which is awesome. And I think that's what we really need to do.
Yeah.
If someone, and it's controversial now, which is sad because I'm a progressive liberal, but, my best friend voted for Trump. He's a conservative. I knew he would. I don't think he did that because he's a hateful, racist, bigot of a person.
Right.
I think he voted for Trump because he thought it was the best thing for him and his family.
Right.
Same reason I voted against Trump.
Right.
I think we need to understand that people aren't doing these things from, a place where they want to harm other people.
Right.
You know?
Right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's so much of America right now, and American culture and American politics, and even to be honest, American religion and evangelicalism is hyperbole, right? Like
Mhm.
we want to claim the moral high ground all of the time, or like our perspective is the perspective that needs to be raised more and more. And I think that creates a divide because, like, if you believe inherently that you're chosen and you're set apart, or that your country or that your ideology, like that is the best way forward, then of course it's going to be divisive. But there's almost no admission in popular culture that like life happens and progress happens in between, like in
Nope.
the shades of gray. And you there's no room for that in American ideology, like hyperbolic and like neoliberalism. There's no room for shades of gray. And in American evangelicalism, there's no room for shades of gray. And I think when you disavow the understanding that life can happen and the meaning of life can be found in those shades of gray, then you miss out on the benefits, and you end up just kind of stalling out because you meet a stalemate. You know what I mean? No one can move, and nothing can change.
Well, it's awful because it is exactly like that. It's a place where nothing can change, but it's also a place where you won't admit how much you are like that person.
Right. You're like focused on the
You know?
differences instead of the similarities.
One thing not always, but that's been really frustrating for me in the last few months when we've been going since really George Floyd.
Mm-hmm.
You keep seeing all of these people that are saying, new words that they learned,
Right.
they got woke over the summer. So now they're saying systemic racism,
Right.
or, my favorite, systematic racism, which does not mean the same thing.
Right.
It doesn't work. No, you
Right.
can't do that. Okay.
Right.
I'm Justin. I'm not Justine. Those are two different things.
Right.
Anyway, so they're saying these words, systemic racism. It's admitting, and it comes off of critical race theory, which is this idea that like America is inherently racist.
Mm-hmm.
We were built upon a foundation of racism. Basically, everything that's happened afterwards has been an effect of that racism. And until that racism is eradicated, which it really can't be.
Right. Not with the current system.
Yeah, things are still going to happen that way.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it's been built.
Mm-hmm.
But then you hear people say things like, how could anyone vote for Trump? He's a racist. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, of course a bunch of people voted for Trump. You just said America was racist.
Right, exactly.
Why are you surprised?
Yeah.
And that's something that's very and then another thing when it comes off of that is you're admitting that it's systemically racist. Yes. So how are you racist?
Right.
Right.
How have you benefited from that system?
How are you and benefit, but how have you been affected by it? How are you a product of racism?
Right.
Because it's the same thing with feminism. It's the same thing with racism, is the fact that the cause of racism is not people. It's the entire idea of race.
Ooh, yeah, that's good.
Racism is a system,
Mm-hmm.
So you need to break down the system. The system is the enemy. People are not your enemy.
Yo, there's a Bible verse that hints to that. And I fully disclose ahead of time that while I am engaging on an interfaith endeavor to be intentionally interfaith, my first language will always be Christianity. And there's a Bible verse that says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against powers and principalities of darkness. And that's like what we're seeing right now. Like you said, like racism is a system. So would you mind explaining to everybody who's watching, our literal tens of watchers, can you talk to me about how race happened, like how race came to be? Because I think if we're going to understand racism, we have to understand that race is not a natural thing, that it's a social construct. But if you could explain that, that'd be amazing.
Oh, that's like a deep cut. That's like 3 hours.
I know. Give us the 30-second version. No, I'm just kidding.
We're going to simplify it. So like, let's just do like 3,000 years of history really quick.
All right.
All people came from Africa.
Right.
Boom. Okay.
Right.
Done. Motherland, all that stuff, cradle of civilization. Then you have this giant diaspora where everybody moved around. Okay. Then because of, basically evolution and things like that, that's how different skin pigmentations, different muscle structure, different facial structure. That all happened after that. Okay, thousands of years done.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get to, and let's cut all the global stuff. Let's get to America
Mm-hmm.
and how race developed in America. It came from the idea of whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
White isn't a thing. Okay, white is not an ethnicity. White is not a race. Okay, you can't go back to the country white.
Mm-hmm.
No. So what does that mean? White is all about power.
Yep.
It's all about power and privilege. You know, and we have examples of that because when the Italians first started coming over here, they weren't white. Neither were Irish people
Mm-hmm.
because they were Catholic. So they couldn't be white. Then, and then we're talking about any, you know, Eastern European.
Right.
So once you had the Civil War, and then once enslaved people were free, you have changing demographics, and suddenly Italian people, Irish people can become white.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can continue to have the majority.
Right. You can continue to be in power if you are white.
Race is a very, I mean, it comes from just power.
Yeah.
That's where it comes from. You know, there is power in numbers, but power also comes from putting other people down.
Yes. Always, 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 always.
You can't be powerful without people under you.
Right.
And the easiest way to separate those two things, how do we know who are the people that are lower than us, is to make it about what do they look like? Because that's super easy.
Yeah.
You know, that's super easy. And that happens not only in America, but, you know, we go to Rwanda with the Hutus and the Tutsis. We would see these people as just Black people, just African people. Why do they kill each other? They're not killing each other. They're killing the other.
Right. Right.
That's what it comes down to. And that is, of course, systemic racism. What does that come from? That comes from power. You know?
Yeah.
And really that is the disgusting issue of race that we have, because it doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. It's a social construct, you know, similar to gender roles.
Yep.
These things don't exist except for in our society. And the scary thing is society is super, super powerful.
Super powerful. Right. Just in the same way that language shapes reality, right? Society shapes reality because we're all active participants in society. But what we don't realize is that we were not born this way. I mean, to be honest, we are ascribed a title of American at birth if we meet certain prerequisites, but we're not actually born American. We're born into a society that tells us who to be and how to function and what is what and when is when and what we got to do, right? But that's not actually a thing. We live our lives based on these intangible social constructs. And I think a lot of people don't understand the idea of a social construct. I feel like if that was a more understood concept, we could have so many more valuable conversations because we could take down these false pretenses, you know? I was writing Conversations core values tonight because I'm in the process of working with a web developer to put up our Conversations website. So I had the core values, but I was trying to flesh them out in form. And I was talking about how, you know, we are because we come together, right? And this systemic othering is something that we have to actively push back against because we have to understand that the system benefits from our division. Because if we aren't divided, we see that we don't need the system.
Yeah.
And that threatens the people who make their money off the system.
Yeah. I mean, that's everything. And we have a way of, and it's been happening throughout history, you know, and we have this way of just, we have those in power who desire these things. They desire to stay in power or to gain power.
Yeah.
And then they're thinking, okay, how do we use other people to get that power? Not only use the others, the bad people, right? The people that are lesser than. And it's always interesting how these people are always lesser than, but also oppressing you.
Yeah. At the same time,
Yeah.
it's a logical fallacy.
Yeah, of course it is. I mean, everything anti-Semitism, which is, it, you know, every racist is different, but each of them is anti-Semitic,
Right.
and it has been throughout history. But and that's a generalization, but I think it's okay to generalize people that are overtly racist.
Yeah.
That's just me. But anyway, if you look at a lot of anti-Semitism, it has this kind of dual thing where it says these people are powerful, they're controlling all the world banks and they run everything. But also they're small, weaselly people who have genetic deformities. And it's like, so they're oppressing you, but they're also lesser than you.
Right.
Self-fulfilling prophecies.
Yeah.
So what the heck was I going to talk about? So one thing I taught this week, which I'd like to kick it to, what I actually talk about in class.
Yeah.
So I've been teaching imperialism
Okay.
because I teach global studies, and I love teaching imperialism. And one thing that my students
Can you define imperialism real quick for those of us who haven't?
So imperialism has been going on forever, and it's still going on. But when we talk about like imperialism for high school, it's talking about new imperialism that came after the Industrial Revolution.
Okay.
So England built all these, or Great Britain built all these factories and started manufacturing goods, sold it to their own people, and then like, okay, our people have all this stuff. What do we do now? We need to sell it to other people, and we need to get more natural resources. So it's when big powerful countries go into less powerful countries and they take over.
All right.
Yeah, and then they take all their natural resources, they bring them back to their country, they break them down, make them into products, and then sell you those products.
Sell you what they took from your country
Yeah.
originally.
So basically, Leo, I'm coming to your house, I'm taking all your furniture, I'm going to bring it to my house, make new furniture, and sell it back to you.
That's messed up.
That's imperialism.
All right.
Yeah. So how do you justify it? Because it's bad. It's a really bad thing to do. How do how do you justify it? You make it about helping these people because they're less than you.
Right.
And there's two things that really blew my students' minds. The one is the idea of the white man's burden.
Mm-hmm.
One of my favorite things to talk about. And it's a whole concept, but it comes from Rudyard Kipling, the writer of the Jungle Book, right?
Yep.
It comes from the poem White Man's Burden, which is take up the white man's burden, send the breast ye breed, bind your sons to exile to serve your captives' need, something heavy harness on flutter folk and wild, your new caught sullen people, half devil, half child. That's the first stanza.
Mm-hmm.
And all you need is that, because it's just super racist.
Right.
But what you're saying by that is saying it's your job as white people to go into other countries and to help these poor Black people out. How do you, and because if you don't help them, they're half devil, they're evil.
Right.
And they're half child, they're stupid.
Yep.
So you got a bunch of stupid evil people running around. We have to help them.
We must help them. It's our mandate.
How do we help them? It's our job because we're so much better than them. How do we help them? We have to make them like us.
Mm-hmm. Assimilation.
But know that as white as they become, they'll never be all white.
Right.
Never.
Right.
But we'll get them as close as possible. And how do we get them to be closer to us? Let's give them our religion too.
Oh, we went on. There's a whole thread. I don't know if you were up on it on the conversations feed this week. About like Christian missions work, which is actually inspiring the book that we're going to be reading as a group. We're going to read the Poisonwood Bible and talk about like just the implications of white missions work in other non-white areas, and what are the underlying things and flaws with that, and is there any benefit? You know what I mean? I can't wait for that. So I have a question that I want to circle back to from the feed. My friend Nick asked us, could you define a social construct? And I can only define it, for me personally, I'm going to be able only to define it based on like analogies. Would you be able to provide us with a more like scholarly definition? Just memorize your textbook for us.
Yeah, that's tough. Because
Right.
I mean, honestly, and I teach high school, that's something that like if you mention that in high school and like 25% of the students get it, you're like, yeah,
Yeah, did a good
good
job.
job. Because the rest of them are just like it's beyond them. It's beyond a lot of people. So it's this idea that there are things that are real,
Right.
you know, and
Immutable things.
real isn't even a good, there are things that are physically there.
Right.
You know, my nose is real. That's
Right.
not a social construct.
Right.
Okay. However, then there are things that are equally as powerful as the physical real things that society has built. You know,
Right.
gender roles,
Right.
stereotypes,
Right.
you know, languages,
Yep.
things like that. These are all
Race.
social constructs. Race,
Right.
of course. These are all social constructs. These things that society has just built this giant, set. This is what you do here. And by being raised in that society, you automatically have those roles.
Right. It's like a board game, right? And the board game itself didn't come from the ground at all, but you exist in these rules. So what happens when you step outside of those rules is everybody loses their mind, right? So for
Yeah.
myself, I identify as non-binary. For those of you who don't know what that means, it means that I exist beyond the gender binary being male or female. That's what binary is. It's one or the other, right?
Mhm.
And I do not identify as either because I was assigned female at birth and I feel very female internally, but for a reason that I have yet to be able to give fancy words to, I just feel more me when I look more masculine. But masculine for me is a physical thing. I can wear nail polish and makeup and still feel comfortable in myself. So it's this weird intermixing of the two. It's not weird. It's this interesting intermixing of the two. So I exist, for me personally, I exist outside the social construct of male or female. And you can really see that exemplified if you look at clothing and toys. Like, let's talk about clothing. Like, a skirt doesn't come with a vagina. There
Right.
are plenty of men throughout history that have worn skirts, and that was considered to be masculine and strong, like a kilt, right? So the idea that females should wear skirts is a social construct.
Mhm.
It's not a real thing. It's not a real thing.
I mean, and it's when we talk about things like being non-binary, and I'll be truthful, it is something that just it rattles my brain.
Right.
And I know, and the thing that doesn't bother me, it bothers a lot of people is, we have these ways of like, okay, we have gender non-binary people now. We have the entire LGBTQ spectrum. We have the entire race spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
And now that we know that it's like, you're either in it or you're not.
Uh-huh.
And you have to be as pure as possible.
Right.
So, for example, one thing that I always have to like tiptoe around. My sister's a professor. I talked at one of her classes and I said, you guys, and my sister, of course, being the super hardcore liberal professor in California that she is, like automatically muted me. And she's like, I'm just going to have to stop you there because you're using gender normative terms. I was like,
son of a monkey.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, am I doing these things on purpose? No. My brain is conditioned to do that.
Right. Because of your
brain is-
society.
Yeah. My brain is conditioned to go outside and be like, boy, girl, child, old person, adult, black person, Hispanic. That is what you go through your life and you do that. That is just
Right.
a fact.
Right.
But do you recognize that those things are happening?
Right.
Do you recognize that your brain has been trained to do that? And what are you going to do about it?
Right.
The issue that we have is the people that they start to feel that little bit of uneasiness. They start to feel that person doesn't fit into a box. What do I do? And instead of saying, oh, that's kind of interesting, I've never thought of it that way, I'm going to want to learn about that, they say, no, I'm right.
Other. Yeah. We just stamp them with other in our brain.
They're the problem because they won't fit into my neat little boxes.
Right.
Something much, much less abrasive in our society than being gender non-binary is being like racially non-binary or
Right.
racially, my sister calls it racially queer, which I've always
Yeah.
found kind of interesting. But you know, I've always identified as being biracial.
Mm-hmm.
And especially in like middle school, I always got the question where you'd meet some people for a few days, especially white people. You meet some white people for a few days.
It's always white people.
Yeah, and then they're just like, "So what are you?"
Oh, I hate that question. What are you?
And I'm like, man, you know, like human, you
Right.
know. But of course, it's a race question. What are you? And I would say, "Oh, I'm biracial."
Yep.
And you know, to not identify as white or black really throws a lot of people off.
Right.
And the trapping of that is there are people in our society, there are people that I went to school with that are lighter skinned than me,
Right.
fairer complexion. The world does not see them as black,
Mm-hmm.
which is okay because race, of course, is a societal construct.
Right.
But the world does not see them as black, but because they were raised there, they're like, I'm black,
Mm-hmm.
you know? And to me that has always been so difficult to understand why those people do that, but it's because they need that.
Yeah.
Because they need to fit into a box because society has made it so damn hard to be outside the box.
Yeah, absolutely. There's
know?
so much of our society that's built on being in or out these invisible boxes. Sometimes being out is just as positive because you can be like, hey, I'm not stuck in that box. You know what I mean? But the boxes aren't real. The boxes aren't real.
The boxes and they're only as real as we want them to be.
Right.
And it's so damn difficult when it comes down to not conforming. Because it really makes you understand how much power society has
Right.
when it comes to race, when it comes to gender, when it comes to sexuality and expression and things like that. It's
It's
so damn
almost
powerful.
Yeah, it's almost like the
It's sad.
boxes are little bits of social capital that people can pick up and use to gain power in our society, right? Because like if I am running for president and I can pick up the box labeled evangelical, I can retain power. If I am trying to gain clout in a specific well, I just keep thinking of Rachel Dolezal, who describes herself as transracial, and that's a whole nother podcast. But she's like, I can pick up the box of social capital that is labeled being black, because there is such a thing as black cultural appropriation, right?
Oh, yeah.
We don't like black people, but we like their music, or we like their this, or we like their that, right? But it's not
Yes.
actually ours. We're just on a field trip. But so she picks up the social capital of this box of being black, and then bases everything on that. And it's almost like it's just a little container of power that people can use to get their power, but not actually help the people in the box.
I mean, just you mentioning Rachel Dolezal just
It's so much.
sent, especially being someone who I had so many identity issues when I was a kid, just trying to be someone who was multiracial,
Right.
who refused to identify, and also had to deal with like forced tokenism.
Right.
You know,
Right.
like I couldn't be, for my white friends, I couldn't be just like Justin or Hubbard. I had to be like, that's the black guy, you know.
Yeah.
I was on the swim team. Thank God my swim team was actually pretty diverse for being a swim team.
Mhm.
You know, but there was someone who was of West African descent. There was one of my buddies was Filipino. A few of my buddies were from India. And we were all on that same team. But on that team, there was a lot of people that are like, yeah, Justin, he's black. He's the black guy. And it was like tokenism. Aren't you supposed to listen to rap? So I struggled with all that stuff. I also struggled with the fact that I wasn't black enough to be black. I wasn't white enough to be white. I was, yeah.
Yeah.
So I was dealing with all that. And then you see this woman who thinks because her hair is a little bit thick and nappy that she's black.
Yeah.
And it was just, to me, that was just extremely frustrating.
Right.
But yeah, it's these things that we feel like we can pick up and use them for power. You see that a lot in politics where, you know, with Barack Obama, for example, the first black president, he was biracial.
Right.
he talked on the campaign, one of his most important speeches. It was right after all the reports of his pastor came out. I forget the name of his pastor.
Yeah. Escaping me at the moment.
But very, very radical pastor, you know, said some very intense, very just really intense stuff, really. If you know, he said like, "Don't God bless America, God damn America," and you know, and everyone's like, "Woo, yeah!" But the problem with that was it freaked out all the white people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So Obama got on and he talked about race while he was on the campaign trail, but he talked about, you know, I am just as much of a member of Black society as I am white society. It's like when I look into a crowd and I see an older white person from Iowa, I see my white grandmother that helped raise me.
Right.
And he talked about that. It's one of the most important speeches of his campaign. It was a huge thing for me because it's like, yeah, that's me.
Right.
But then the entire time of his presidency, you heard about how he was the first Black president.
Right.
Kamala Harris, you constantly hear about how she's Black. Yes, but she's also of Indian descent.
Yeah. Huge.
You're allowed to be of both.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
It's almost like I'm just verbal processing right now. I have a feeling you're a verbal processor as well. But it's almost like when you exist outside of the box, you can't be bought. Like you can't be comprehended, and so therefore you can't be manipulated or bought or used. Like somehow, and I don't fully understand it now, but I'm verbally processing it with you. Is like somehow being outside of the box threatens the system, right? Because you can't be bought. You don't belong to any man. You just are you. And that sort of enlightenment is way too scary for the people who that sort of understanding is way too scary for the people who haven't encountered it, because it's like, I fit in here. You're like a kitten who just got rescued. You're like, I fit in this tiny little box, but then you set those same people in a big room and they're like, I don't know what to do. Right. But we've become comfortable in that big room.
It's one of those things I see that on everywhere, and it doesn't matter what side you're on. So everything to me goes back to politics, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
But when
not sadly, that's politics, totally okay.
Yeah, but when you're talking about politics, for example, when we're talking about politics, for example, when it comes to one of the worst things we do on the left is cancel culture.
Mm-hmm.
I think we don't allow for diversity.
Right.
We really don't, because we don't let, and I'm talking not diversity of skin color or gender, diversity of thought.
Right.
We constantly try to cancel people. You know, one thing that bothered me is we don't have a lot of not patience, but acceptance of just thinking critically. Just really critically think about these things.
Yeah.
2 examples. One, Al Franken. Okay. Al Franken got booted out of the Senate because a bunch of pictures came up of him when he wasn't a senator, and he was sexually harassing people.
Okay.
Pretty lewd photos, but he was a comedian at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He came out and said, when I did that stuff, it was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. I wouldn't do that now. I've become better. I've learned from it. Kristen Gillibrand basically got him kicked out of Senate, and then she used that as her resume to run for president.
Okay.
To me, it's saying, yes, he did something wrong. Should we cancel him, or should we allow him to learn? Let's weigh that with everything else that he's done.
Yeah.
You know, when you cancel someone, you are saying that person can't improve.
Your journey disqualified you.
When that person can't improve, though, then neither can you.
Right.
So all it's going to take is you messing up one time. You're not pure.
Yeah.
You're not. You've done horrible things in your life.
Absolutely.
Doesn't matter who it is.
I can think of 10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's okay. You're allowed to go back and say that was horrible. Right. Now, if someone has committed a major crime, a sex crime, a hate crime, a violent crime, and I find out, am I going to vote for them? maybe not,
Props not.
but if we believe in things like criminal justice reform and we believe in people growing, we should be able to say that person did a horrible thing, but they're not a horrible person.
Mm-hmm.
The other example that I go back to, which is something that I struggled with, and I almost want to hear your opinion. I do want to hear your opinion on it.
I'm ready.
Gina Carano.
Okay.
You know who Gina Carano is?
I don't. Tell me, and then I'll give you my
Used
opinion.
to be an MMA fighter.
Okay.
And now she's kind of an actress, and she's on the new Star Wars show, The Mandalorian. Great show, by the way.
Okay.
She is, I think she's conservative. She really hasn't come out. But one of the things that the left really did for her, because Star Wars fans are the most toxic fans, by the way.
Good to know.
Yeah, but they went after her because on her Twitter or on her Instagram, she didn't have her pronouns out.
Uh-huh.
She didn't have it. And they're like, put out your pronouns. And she's like, you know how I identify. I've never questioned, like, this is how I express myself. This is how I identify. It's just not something I do. People pressured her enough. Then she came out and her pronouns were beep, bop, boop. Now, to me, I'm thinking, one, stupid move.
Yeah.
Stupid move. Because you don't know how much harm that causes. But
Yeah.
also, why were you doing it?
Yeah.
You were trying to be funny.
Yeah.
You were trying to be funny. Now, I want to know what do you think about that? Is this someone that once they do that, they're completely cut off or done? Or is the intent of it, does that have something to do with it? Does that go into the judgment at all?
So if I was to encounter her now, right, how would I engage with her? So basically for me, I think a couple of things happen. First of all, that cheapens the understanding of people who are non-binary. And second of all, it kind of disenfranchises you from having any sort of impacting conversation with the people who don't understand people who are non-binary. Like, you just messed it up on both sides. Now, that being said, I've done plenty of messing things up on both sides, especially coming out as a gay Christian. You know, when people came out to me, and I didn't react poorly to them, but I didn't react well to them either, right? And so I wasn't either a good Christian or a good gay at the time, right? But the thing is that you can see if someone has learned from something, you can tell when you have rapport with them. So for me to know what was up with her, I would have to engage. And I think that so much, this is what happens in the world with hyperbole, is that we don't engage with people who are different. And we don't engage in tough conversations. We just make judgments based on, one or the other. But the thing is there's a narrative. People live a narrative, and a narrative is a winding, twisting, turning, evolving thing. And so she could have had a journey that I don't know about that wasn't as public as the beat boot bop thing. She could have had a whole experience that showed her, that was messed up, right? Or she could have not bothered to engage and still think it's comical, right? And I'm only going to learn that if I talk to her.
And that's exactly, this is what I thought you would say, because I think that's where we need to go as a society. And I don't see it happening, but we have to, again, think critically. We have to get to the point where we're saying, look at it from every angle. But to me, you have to allow people to grow.
You have to, because you have to grow.
Yeah. And that's where it comes down to me, where I'm like, screw this person. This is a horrible human being. But then I'm like, if they can't grow, then neither can I.
Right. There's some sort of commentary there. Yeah.
And I think when I teach kids, and teenagers are big into, especially when it comes to history, they want it black and white.
They do.
And so many times they ask me, was that a bad person or a good person?
Right.
Was it a good guy or bad guy? And really, there are a few people that when you teach them, you're like, okay, guys, people, this is a bad guy.
Closed canon, done.
Hitler, this is a bad guy. Yep. Pol Pot. If you know who Pol Pot is?
No.
Look up Pol Pot. I mean, if we're talking interesting history, Pol Pot in Cambodia basically said the industrialized world is evil. So he took over Cambodia and just took everyone out of the city and made them work in like these rural factories and then just massacred 100,000.
You got to drop a link to that so we can all be educated by that.
I can do that. Look up Pol Pot. It's one of the most interesting things, and nobody knew about it until the country got invaded. I forget what country invaded them, but then everyone was like, wow.
Holy crap. Yeah.
Terrifying.
Yeah.
But you look at these people like, okay, I have to teach those people is evil. But when it comes to the founding fathers, for example,
yeah,
George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, these people had slaves. They had enslaved people.
Mhm.
Are they therefore bad people that we shouldn't learn about?
Right.
No. Should we should we knock over their monuments? You know, should we do all this stuff? We have to really think about that because they did great things.
Right.
They did. That's one of the things that really frustrates my students. And when it frustrates my students, I think it would frustrate most adults too.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah.
Because we want good people and we want bad people. When we look at our country, we want to be like, America's the greatest country on earth. We're the good guys. Like, no, we've done some bad stuff. We're still doing some bad stuff.
Yeah.
When you look at Christianity, Christians do some horrible things.
Really bad shit.
Yeah. And you look at imperialism, you know, the fact that Christianity was used to justify that. You look at there's just so much harmful stuff. You look at the thing that really got me out of church was the anti-LGBTQ rhetoric.
Yeah.
You know, that really got me out of the church. Because I was like, it just doesn't work. Yeah. It doesn't match up.
It doesn't at all.
Why are we hating these people? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And it also really frustrated the people that run my youth group were really frustrated when I kept bringing up the Council of Nicaea at youth group.
Like, that's a whole nother podcast.
Yeah, and I'm like, we should talk about this. Like, what books were left out? And they're like, no, don't do it. Because again, if I admit that core book that just is the foundation of my entire life and identity, if I admit that that's flawed, then I'm flawed, then I know nothing, and then it's like crisis.
Everything crumbles. So for those of you who don't know, the Council of Nicaea was where the Bible that we have was canonized, right? So they just basically a group of white men in power, if we're using white as a term of power brokerage, but affluent white men decided what was in and what was out at the Council of Nicaea. And there are other gospels that you might have never read, gospels written by women, gospels written by doubters. You know what I mean? They're all in these other things, but they were pushed out and everything else was in. And it's not reality to say that one, like if a narrative is still ongoing, then it's still ongoing, right? Like Hitler died and his narrative ended at that point. So it's easy to teach him as evil because there was no redemption, and there definitively was no redemption. But that's not the way that most things are. Anybody who's living, their narrative is still going. So there's always a chance for them to change and them to grow and then to do better. And I think that having these out of the binary conversations are what matters, because it allows us all a chance to grow and to evolve and to do and be better.
And I totally agree with that. I think the overall theme that we keep going back to is that the people have to be able to grow and become better people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's interesting that I don't even know what this conversation, what the whole hour and a half was supposed to be about, but it ended up being about this, which is pretty dope.
Yeah.
But we have to allow people to grow and be better.
Yeah.
And that needs to happen for just all of our society.
Yeah.
We have to stop canceling other people. And it goes back to that whole, Christian ideology of hate the sin, love the sinner.
Yeah.
Which to me is like always problematic because of the term hate.
Yeah.
I don't want to hate it all. Hate, nothing good comes from that.
Never.
Yeah. But we have to understand that, like, really break it down. So I'm going full circle. Go back to the people that you don't understand.
Right.
Instead of pushing them out, try to figure out and learn from those people.
Yeah.
have a good conversation with them.
Yeah.
And go, one of the things I like to do is go into a conversation with people that I just disagree on so many fronts from, and try to find that little bit that we agree on.
Find that commonality.
Find a
Challenge yourself
commonality.
to find it.
And it might be friggin' hard.
Yeah.
It might just come down to something that's complete bullcrap, where it's just like, yo, we like the same food. Like, you like
Right.
pizza, I like pizza. Cool, man. What do you know? But you find that common ground, and then suddenly it's easier to understand that person.
Yeah. Yo.
And I
Okay.
think that-
Go ahead.
yeah.
Sorry.
That's where we need to get. That's where we need to go.
Yeah.
Because from that relationship, you're going to help that person, but oh my gosh, they're going to help you grow.
Yeah.
Like crazy.
Yeah. The title of our conversation, of course, brunch is canceled, meaning there's more work to do. But the after the colon, because we all know I love a title with a colon in it, was the intersection of education and activism. And I think that's actually randomly on trend for what we're talking about, is because when you know better, you do better. And if you know better, you act better. And if you know better and don't act better, then you suck. And then then you're done and you're taught as evil forever. But when you know better, you do better. That's the whole heart of it. And you can't know unless you press outside of the boundaries of what you can't learn unless you press outside of the boundaries of what you know.
And I think that intersection for me really, you know better, you do better. It hurts though.
Yeah. Oh, it sucks.
I love learning, but it's fun to learn certain things. And then the things that really are important to learn are the ones that really hurt, the ones that are a struggle. And I think that intersection of education and activism, which I love because it's really my life, is we have to be teaching people that they can always learn, that they can always grow. But now that we have this knowledge, what the heck are you going to do with it?
Yeah.
And I mean, we'll definitely have to do another one of these where I actually talk about teaching and what I do. But there are a few things that, and we're coming to the end of this, so I just got to run through a few things, being a teacher. One of the biggest issues we have in social studies education is that we have taught our social studies teachers that they are not allowed to talk about their own opinions or expressions or anything like that. That's garbage.
Yeah.
One of the things we need to teach our students is bias.
Yeah.
And it affects everyone. Therefore, it is affecting you as a student. It's affecting me as a teacher. So when I say things, you're going to get my bias there.
Yeah.
You're not just this robot. Robot teachers are bad. We want teachers that, hey, here are all the facts. This is what I think about them, though. This is what other people think about them, though. What do you think about them?
Where do you land?
And that's okay to do, So you have to do that. That's called critical thinking. You have to teach the kids, when everyone's like, oh, the teachers are liberally indoctrinating the kids. And, I have teachers that are so scared to talk about their own personal beliefs, personal politics, anything like that their classes come off as just completely undynamic and extremely boring.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to be entertained to learn. Put in your own thought. Learn other people's thoughts. Put that in there. Make the kids really have to think about it. And it's like, where do you land on this stuff?
Absolutely.
So we have to start doing that in education. And that leads to activism, because once you learn about something like imperialism, I read you White Man's Burden. We break down that first stanza. Then it's, how can we not talk about systemic racism?
Right. It naturally spurs us to action.
It doesn't just end. How can we not, when we talk about things like, the women's rights movement, how can we not then talk about just gender roles?
Yeah.
And anti-feminism. How can we not then, when we're talking about the civil rights movement, how can we not then just talk about Stonewall?
Yeah.
You have to get into these things.
Yeah. And that's why brunch isn't canceled, because it's that we are in an open canon historically. When I say canon, it means when the Bible is closed. Yeah.
You said it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. Brunch is not canceled.
It is.
Brunch is canceled. I got it. Brunch is canceled.
I'm not going.
No, no, I'm not going. I got stuff to do. I got too many things to learn, and frankly, like what I know now is nowhere near what I want to have known by the time I pass away. Right?
You got to learn for your entire life, and you can have your mimosas at home. They're not that hard to make.
There you go. Yeah. And that, my friends, is why brunch is canceled. So,
Okay.
Justin, I'm going to hold you to this because we're already like 10 minutes over time or 20 minutes over time when we said we were going to end. But I want to thank you for bringing your unique take on this, because part of what why I'm bringing different people on conversations is because of their different areas of expertise. So we can think about one problem, like say if we want to build a park, we can think about building a park as a city planner. We can think about building a park as an environmentalist. We can think about building a park as an engineer. We can think about building a park as a resident of that area. Like we have to examine the world fearlessly and in an ongoing manner from every angle, or we will never fully be able to engage it or live our best lives. And that, my friends, is why we cannot go to brunch. We have to continue.
Yeah. You can't go to brunch. I definitely want to do one of these again, because I feel like every time we talk, we're like, we're going to talk about this. And then there's the 30 other things we talk about. And I'm just
Absolutely.
like, yo, but to end it, I mean, because I'm talking about education, I always have to say, Leo, you're a parent. What's one of the most important things you can do with your kids when it comes to education? Do you know?
For my kids, I like to talk to them about like how the information that they learned impacted them. Like, what did they really take away from it?
I love that. It's one of the things I always tell my students. You go home from class, I want your parents to ask you what you learned today.
Yeah.
And I want you to talk to your parents about it for 5 minutes. And then when I meet with their parents, I said, dude, you gotta ask your kid what you learned today, because then I look like a fool. Okay.
Yeah, you gotta care.
So you have to do that, which is what you're doing, which is beautiful. Parents, read to your damn kids.
Mm-hmm.
Read to your kids, because one of the easiest, and this is just like straight up education, but one of the biggest problems we have is we have something, I believe it's a 3 million word gap when it comes to students, when it comes to children that live in poverty and children that don't. They usually enter school and there's a 3 million word gap that they have.
Wow.
If you can't read by time, I believe it's 10, you're much more likely to drop out of school. Wow. Which means you're much more likely to commit multiple crimes, which means you're much more likely to go to jail.
Right.
And live in prison.
Right.
Read to your kids.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
It's something like that, where when we're talking about things like inequity and inequality and things like that, you boom, do it like that.
Yeah.
You know,
gotta do it.
You know, and when you do that, when you have that experience with your kids, then you'll learn from them, they'll learn from you, and you'll get to talk about important stuff like race, like ethnicity, like gender, like belief systems and all that. And that, to me, is where it really just, where education just starts, glowing.
Yeah.
You get to talk about the hard stuff.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
It should happen in the classroom. It should happen in the sanctuary. It should happen in the community center. That dialogue and that engaging and that conversation, because you don't just learn from facts. You learn from engaging facts, and you learn from the narratives.
You learn from engaging, and you learn from challenging yourself, and you learn from really having difficult conversations. Teachers, if you're not having difficult conversations with your students, you're not doing your job.
Yeah, absolutely.
Challenge them, challenge yourself, talk about things that are tough to talk about. And you have to do that in social studies. Yep. If you have social studies teachers that aren't doing that, they suck. But you should be able to do that in every other subject as well. And the good teachers are the ones that are doing that. And they're growing right along with their students. Absolutely. And parents need to be doing that as well, because to raise a child, and I'm just running through everything now, but to raise a child, it doesn't just take a parent and a teacher, it takes an entire community.
Yeah.
Everybody has to be everything. Teachers have to be parents, parents also have to be teachers.
Yeah. It's so interesting that we keep talking about different things, but really what it comes back to is the multifaceted nature that you have to embrace to learn and to grow and to create a good world. So very curious.
You gotta grow.
Yeah.
But we gotta go.
We gotta go. You gotta grow, but we gotta
this.
go. So
I think every 17 weeks we're gonna have to do this.
I like it. I'm down, because what's gonna happen is, like, every time we're gonna write a list of things we didn't talk about, and then we're gonna schedule another one, and then we're talking that one, and then we're gonna not talk about the things we scheduled. So
Yeah. Like one of these, we're gonna have to go into like deep cut history. Like
yeah,
we have to do like an hour and a half on just the Crusades.
I'm ready for it. Oh God.
Like,
So what you're saying is you're gonna be a recurring guest.
it's gonna have to happen.
All right.
Either I'm on this, or it'll just be us texting about it.
This is literally, you guys have literally seen an insight about how Justin and I text. So yes, it's always this kind of conversation. No, it's never easy, but yes, it always makes me better for it. So everybody, it's fantastic. Everybody else that's out there, are literal tens of watchers. Thank you for coming. Thank you for engaging. I truly believe that something happens, some sort of alchemy happens in the midst of these winding conversations. We are bravely vulnerable and intentionally courageous with our thoughts and with ourselves. And I think that is the ether, that is the alchemy that makes the world a better place. So thank you for joining us. Justin, thank you for joining us. We'll absolutely have you back. If you are just watching this, you stumbled upon this in a random way. This is Conversations. We are an intentional community that generates spiritually minded conversations about life, whatever that means to you, but we're just trying to know and do better. You can find us on Facebook at Conversations Official. You can find our Facebook group at Conversations Official. Under the name Conversations Official, we're also accessible on YouTube and Instagram, and in podcast form on Spotify, Anchor, and almost everywhere else that podcasts are found. We're also, within the next week, we will have conversationsofficial.com that it'll be available for you to go and find all of the information that we're talking about. Links to all of our speakers, fact checking, historical links that come up in the comments, our calendar of events, and we are also going to have some Conversations Official merch. The merch will go to help fund Zoom and the website and all of the things that allow us to build this digital community in an age that we could all too easily fracture because of geographic distance. We're going to fight back against that notion, and we're going to grow together, and we're going to be better because of it. That's what Conversations Official is all about. Thank you so much for coming. My name's Leo WT. This is Justin Hubbard. Reach out to either of us on social media, and we will do our best to hit you back. Have a good night, everybody.
This has been the Conversations Podcast. Thank you so much for joining. If you have any questions or comments, or just want to get involved, feel free to join the conversation on social media. You can find us at Conversations Official on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. And please don't forget to rate, follow, and share this podcast. We're available on Anchor, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for joining the conversation.